All right. Welcome to tonight's webinar on heat pumps 101. This presentation will be completely done by the wonderful Steve Clark. Steve, go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for joining. Yeah, this is usually done as several people from the Haverford EAC, myself, Joy, and Sam. Both of them couldn't make it tonight. We're going to talk about heat pumps, some basic things, but also electrifying your yard equipment. And so Joy has supplied that content. I will try to cover that as best I can. And Sam had some really nice slides of his experience completely electrifying his house by himself. He's a contractor, and so I took those out. So it'll be a little shorter. But if we could just, before we start, is there anything in particular people in the audience would like to focus on, since we have a pretty small group, or cover? Because we can keep this informal, given that. Is there anything special that you'd like to cover?
I have an HVAC, and I'd like to know about how you converted an HVAC to a heat pump, and why you would do it, because an HVAC is electric anyway.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
And feel free to put anything in the chat at any time, and I can ask some questions as we go along.
Of course, most people say when it gets too cold, do they work? So we should.
Okay. Yeah, we will cover that. The answer to that is definitely. So for my day job, I'm an engineer and I support New York State's clean heat program. And people may know that the state and the utilities have aggressive multi-billion-dollar initiative to electrify HVAC. And as people probably know too, it gets very cold upstate in New York, and the state is insisting on complete electrification. So none of these, oh, we have a boiler and we'll use it when it's cold. We won't give money for that. And we've done tens of thousands of houses with no complaints. So I'll get into the cold climate part of that a little bit, but that's just me. That's what I do. Joy, you guys may know, is the co-chair of the environmental advocacy committee for Haverford Township, and Sam is a resident and a passionate electrification advocate. So if we look at these, people can see these two things right here. This is pretty common right here. People see this a lot. Do people know what this is here?
That's an HVAC.
Yeah, but what does it do?
Yeah, what does it do? That's a good question.
Does it heat? Does it cool?
It cools and heats. It air conditions and it heats.
It could, but in most houses, this just
Oh,
does.
no, wait. There's a gas furnace that it's related to. So the gas furnace is doing the heating. My bad.
That's true in this house. But this is what we call an air conditioner condenser. They're like this on a block, and most of them feed into a furnace, a furnace with a ducted air handler.
Oh.
And though this is one of the easiest things you can electrify, because you can replace this unit, which only cools, with a heat pump, and it will look almost exactly the same. This, on the other hand, this is my neighbor's actually. They're putting cooling in some new rooms. This is a heat pump, and this will do both of them.
So the heat pump cools and heats.
Correct. And this one, like you said, this could be a heat pump. We can't tell, but I know that this is actually only an air conditioner, a condenser. And most of the times when you see this, anybody that has these is a really good candidate to replace with heat pumps. And just another aside, so if you have ducts and you have one of these, it's very easy to replace this with a heat pump. And on top of that, if you're burning oil for your heat, you're going to save a lot of money, or propane. I'm going to move on. So I don't know if people have heard of the Zero Energy Project, but there's a lot of effort out there to electrify everything. And I think we all realize, if you're following the science in the news, we have to do this really fast as a civilization to stem off really awful things happening. And so there's a lot of resources. I have a slide, the final slide has a lot of these links, so you don't have to write everything down. This is a little graphic I made that describes all the things you can do in your house to electrify your life. And I have these little icons here in terms of what would your carbon impact be? And when I have 3 trees, this is a lot. And then, but also I have how expensive is it and how complicated is it? And the 3 big ones are putting PV on your house. All these things are going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, for instance, to do this. Buying an electric vehicle, huge impact on your carbon, but also fairly expensive. And also heat pumps. Heat pumps definitely fit that bill. Probably even more complicated than these 2. And we'll get into some things. Hopefully it'll be less confusing tonight. But there's other things you can do. Converting your water heater to a heat pump is very substantial in terms of carbon. It's like a pretty solid, strong thing you can do. It's moderately expensive. You can get these heat pump water heaters at Lowe's for $1,500 and get them put in. With a contractor, it'd probably be more. And then there's clothes dryers, which are in the same range. The heat pump ones are, say, 1,000-ish. And Sam has some good experience with that. And we had previous content on this in this slide deck on all these technologies, but I took them out. Another one we also talked about before is induction stove. So getting rid of your gas range and putting induction, which is a pure electric. And a lot of people think a superior cooking technology, and it's also safer in terms of you're not breathing toxic fumes in your house. And then finally, there's yard equipment. And there's a lot of advantages to this. It has modest, obviously, carbon because you only use it a certain amount per year, but it's fairly inexpensive. And we're going to go into this in a little detail tonight, electrifying your yard equipment and heat pumps. But the point here is there's a lot of stuff you can do. Like if you can't get an electric car, maybe you could think about doing something down here that's a little more achievable. One thing to be aware of is in your house is your panel. This is my, I have a 150-year-old house, and this is a 100-amp panel. If you can see the breaker up here, when you look, if you go down in your basement, if you have a newer house or a new panel, it probably says 200 here. You're totally primed and ready to go with all this stuff, but you're going to need more power to do this. And there are ways to, there is money available in the Inflation Reduction Act to replace these. And, but there are also some of these YouTube links here describe, do you actually need to do it? Most cases you don't, even with a 100-amp panel. But that's something that is a very important thing, because when you're on a really cold day, you're going to be pulling a lot of current if you use a heat pump that you wouldn't have with a gas furnace. So this is just an important part of the equation to think about. I'm going to go into a little bit of yard equipment here. I think we're all familiar in spring now of the loud single cycle gas equipment that is constantly, frankly, ruining a lot of our weekends and so they not only do they provide, they make a lot of noise, they also emit a lot of carbon. So if you run a gas mower for 1 hour, it's equivalent to 300 miles of a car, which is just astounding. And these are the worst, these blowers, and they also in terms of the carbon and the pollution and the particulates that people are breathing and the noise. So there's a lot of things here that and these are cheap. And most people, and another advantage of all this stuff is you don't have to worry about storing gas in your shed or anything. It's safer in that way. So a lot of people are realizing this. Home Depot is switching by 2028. Almost all of their yard equipment will be electric, and this is lawnmowers, leaf blowers, edgers, all that kind of stuff. And the batteries technology has improved so much over like 5 years ago that the batteries last long, they're light, they're easy to charge, etc. It's not where it was a few years ago where the technology was just really not ready. California is banning these single cycle mowers actually this year. So there's a lot of people taking the lead here. Any questions about yard equipment or any thoughts? Or I think that's all we have here. And Lowe's is also doing the same thing. So this is just where everything is going.
I have an electric mower. And I have an electric mower.
Good.
And I don't think it cuts quite as well as my old mower. The blade is not as heavy.
Right.
I mean, it does the job.
Yeah, you're probably right. There's a power difference. But I imagine that's changing pretty quickly. Again, as batteries are just getting cheaper and better and more powerful. So one option, you can have corded ones, which are kind of a pain in the yard, but certainly doable. And then you can get around all that battery stuff. And of course, there's the push mower. I have a push mower as well. I grew up on one, and I kind of like the exercise. But it's a good time to think about this now. And again, just the quality of the products is accelerating so quickly. All right, we'll move on if that's okay.
Yep.
I'm not going to talk about heat pumps. I'm going to describe a little bit about how they work. And it might sound kind of weird. I think people are used to air conditioners pumping heat out of your house into the outside, when actually the outside is hotter than the inside. I think we all take that for granted, but that's kind of a weird thing to do, like to move heat from a cold to a hot place. But an air conditioner is a heat pump. And let me see if I can clarify this with an analogy. So water moves from high levels to low. Like if you look at, this is a lake here, it will go down naturally to a low area. It'll just spontaneously do that. But if you put a pump in here, you can pump it backwards. If you put a little bit of energy in here, you can pump it back. Okay? With water, I think we're all comfortable with that. And heat does the same thing. It moves from warm, think of this as warm. It will always go from warm to colder temperature. But a heat pump does the reverse. And actually, internally, the way it works is through the same thing. So it's always going to be outside, that condenser thing in the winter. The refrigerant is going to be actually much colder than the outside air. And so that's going to absorb all that heat and bring it into your house. And so I hope that makes sense. It's really no different than these ones we're familiar with, where here you're pumping heat out of a house, essentially uphill. Same with a refrigerator, you're pumping heat uphill. But it really works only because heat always flows from a warmer place to a colder place. And these heat pumps have these coils where the refrigerant can get really cold and just absorb all heat, even when it's pretty cold outside. So one question is that we talked about is, do they work in cold temperatures? And like I was saying, that absolutely yes. And there's also been a lot of standardization of the testing and verification of how well heat pumps work at very cold temperatures. So this is a consortium called Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, neep.org, and it's a database anybody can access. And so you can search for heat pumps that of different sizes, different configurations, blah, blah, blah. And as you guys know, there's now federal tax credits. So you can click a box, and you should always click the box to get your $2,000 maximum here. But as of now, there's 120,000 models listed, okay? And for them to be listed in this, it has to be at least 175% efficient at 5 degrees, okay? Which is pretty impressive. Your a gas furnace is only 80% efficient, period. So down at 5 degrees, and so a lot of these are now being rated at even lower temperatures. A lot of models that are coming out going down to -15. So the question, if you talk to a contractor, a lot of them, especially around here, are not comfortable with the technology, or they might not be, and they'll try to sell you a heat pump with a furnace together, like a gas furnace, because they don't trust or believe that heat pumps will work that low. And frankly, they don't want someone calling in the middle of winter saying, hey, my house is cold, you did a bad job. So they want to just give you like 5 times as much power as you need on the coldest day. Completely unnecessary. And here's an example. This is an example of a model that's listed. This is a Mitsubishi one. This is one actually Sam has put in his house. So I don't know if you can see this little table here, but it shows the heating and cooling efficiency at 95 degrees, which is like the hottest day, right? 82, which is a warm. And then down in the winter, we got 47, which is mild, 17, which is reasonably cold, and then 5 degrees. Okay, so this gives you the efficiency at all these temperatures. This is a COP is a measure of efficiency. So a COP of 1.52 means it's 152% efficient. So for every unit of electricity that goes to heat pump, it moves 1.5 units of heat into your house. That's one way to think of it. And so you can see these numbers are show how efficient it is, like when it's very cold. It also shows the power. So if you can see this, one thing about heat pumps that you need to be aware of is it's different than your gas furnace. If you have a gas furnace, it has a certain size, like say 50,000 BTUs per hour. It's going to do that all year. It doesn't care about your outside temperature. It's always going to give that. Heat pumps are less powerful and less efficient the colder or the hotter it gets. And your air conditioner is no different. On a really hot day, it has to work that much harder to cool your house than on a mild day, right? Just because it's really hot outside. So it has to pump the heat up a really high hill, you know? Think of that. And it's the same thing when it's really cold, to get it heat from outside where it's really cold into your 70-degree house, it has to just work harder. So it's less efficient. So that's why with heat pumps, you can see why some contractors aren't really sure about that, because how much heat does your house need on the coldest day? That's the question. And some of them may have good instincts on this. but in New York State, we require all the contractors to run a particular, it's a standard HVAC calculation called a manual J that says on the coldest day here, say, I think in Philadelphia, the coldest day in terms of these standards is like 15 degrees. You need this amount of heat. And then if they put one in that has that or more, you'll be totally fine in the coldest day. So that's an important,
So Steve, does
Yeah.
it matter how warm you keep the house?
it does. So obviously at
Talk about
70,
that.
yeah, obviously at 70, if you run your house at 72 versus 68, it's gonna have to work that much harder to
It can
get,
do that.
what's that?
It can do that,
Oh, yeah,
okay?
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you're only heating your house to 50 degrees, you don't need as much power, right, as you do at 70 in the winter.
Right.
Yeah, but it's all gotta be, the right heat pump has to be chosen for your house. And I'll get to it at the end, but what we're doing in our EAC is there's an email address. Is this right, Melissa? Have switched at Gmail? Is that what it's called?
Yep,
Have a
have
switch.
switch. I'll put
Yeah.
it in the chat.
Okay, I have it at the last slide, but basically you can just shoot an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, about heat pumps, or I'm getting some quotes. And then Sam and I will go out and we'll talk to you, we'll look at your house, look at your Pico bills. And Pico, if you have gas bills, it will tell me, and I can figure out how much heat you need on the coldest day from your utility bills. So there's a lot of ways we can help you, like, go through the quotes and all that process, but I'll get to that in a second. I'm just going to go through some now different types of heat pumps. So heat can come from any source outside. In the winter, you're pumping in your house. The most common are air source heat pumps. And do you remember that first slide I had? There was that one heat pump on the left, that Dakin unit, that kind of rectangular box. That's taking heat from the air and pumping into my neighbor's house. And that's what this is right here. And so in the winter, it takes heat from the air and then puts it, in this case, this would be a furnace or an air handler. And it'll do the reverse in the winter. It'll cool the house. No different than a regular air conditioner unit like we just saw on the front first slide, that other one. It operates exactly the same, but just backwards in the winter. So this is called an air source ducted heat pump. So this is a duct system. If you have ducts, that's easy. If you don't have ducts, people put in these called mini split systems, where they have these cassettes that can go on the walls. These are also really popular. I'm sure people have seen these all over. If you have radiators or you don't have ducts, these are a very popular way to do it. So they do essentially the same thing, and each room would have a different indoor unit cassette that would have a little fan in here and essentially heat or cool your room. So that's air source. Another really common one is ground source. So you can also take the heat from our earth and pull it in the winter. Because if you go down, say 5 or 6 feet, or maybe 8 feet, the ground is pretty constant, about like 55 degrees all year round. So if you think about it, in the winter, pulling heat out of the ground at 55 into your house is much more efficient than pulling it out when it's 10 degrees from the air, right? It makes sense. And the same in the winter, in the summer, when it's 95 outside, pulling heat from the ground, or maybe it's 55 or 60 in August, is so much easier, and you have so much more efficiency. And that's what these loops are here. It's essentially pulling a water with antifreeze in it through this, and then pulling the heat out of this, or putting heat into this, so the earth is absorbing heat in the summer, and you're pulling heat out of it in the winter. Does that make sense?
Question, how much more expensive is that than a normal?
It's a lot more expensive, because and it's a lot more complicated because you often have to deal with two contractors. You have the driller who's doing this, who does this, two sets of trades often, and the person who put in the heat pumps. But yeah, these can run, say, 30,000-ish, 40 for a house. And they also have to test your soil to make sure it's okay in terms of, like, if you have just rock, if you live on rock, it won't work, etc. So it's more complicated. But one of the nice things about this is you don't have those kind of ugly things outside, and these units last a lot longer. They have a like an official lifetime of at least 25 years. Kind of like solar panels. Like, we all know they last that long. They probably last way longer, but it's several decades this will go. Whereas, your condenser, which is the same as a heat pump, has a 15-year lifetime. So that will eventually wear out. It's outside, it's exposed to the elements, blah, blah, blah. But it's a lot cheaper and a lot simpler. So there's some really neat innovation. As I was saying, 5 years ago, we could never have that program in clean heat where we can confidently go down to 5 degrees or -15, right? The technology was just not here. And the technology is just, it's just accelerating. So this is one thing that I think is really cool. And I signed up to buy one of these when they are coming out. Right now they're doing pilots in New York City. They have so this is an alternative to your window unit air conditioner. So this is a heat pump. This is called a saddle design. So you put it in your window, like your windowsill would be right here, okay? And then you can actually shut your window, and this is below your window, which is kind of cool. You don't have to obstruct your window at all. And so in New York City, there's pilots right now with 20,000 of these in low-income housing, with this company called Medea. And this is a Medea here. And what's really cool about this is it runs on 120-volt power. You just plug it in, okay? I don't know how much these things cost, but because they're not on the market yet, but they're really efficient at low temperature. I don't know if you can see this right here, but at 0 degrees in heating, it's 170% efficient, which is just as good as those ones I was showing you on the NEEP list. Like, really, this can work during a cold freeze and heat your house. But you'd have to get one in each room. But anyway, this is really exciting, I think, because if you have radiators like I do, and a boiler system, and you put in window units, you're kind of in a tight spot right now. Like, what do you do if you want to electrify? As I was saying, the easiest one is if you have a furnace and ductwork, because you can just put in an air source heat pump, pretty cheap, pretty straightforward. But there's not really a technology that would work for a house like mine until this. This is one that you could keep your fossil boiler as a backup for whatever reason if this were to fail, or you could just gradually get rid of it, take it out. So this is one thing. Another thing that is really exciting is this is an air source heat pump. So these are called air to water heat pumps. And we're also doing a lot of pilots in New York State with this technology. And so this pumps heat from the outside into water. So if you have a water heating system with like radiators circulating through your house, this can do that job with one caveat, in that if you have cast iron radiators like I do, you need hot water. And these ones, the ones that are on the market right now, can't do that. If you have there's other kind of radiators. Have you ever seen the ones that are like baseboards and they have the little fins on them, like aluminum fins, and then there's
That's
hot
That's what I
water?
have. I
Yeah.
have two kinds of heating in my house.
I have it also. I
Yeah,
have it.
these ones can do that. These ones can, those radiators can work with lower temperature. And you probably could, but you would still be stuck for cooling. So like, then you'd be like, okay, what do I do for cooling? So, they do sell, these companies do sell, and there's a lot of them. And we just started incentivizing them in New York, but Vermont and Massachusetts have been incentivizing these for the last few years. And this technology, by the way, is a very mature technology in Europe and Asia. And it's another case where the US is behind in a lot of these green technologies, but I think we're catching up. So that anyway, these companies make these cassettes that you could put instead of your radiator, that would have the fans that would be able to do cooling and heating for low temperature. But you can already see that's a more complicated project to do, to replace your existing radiators with one that can do cooling too. It's not impossible. Like for new construction, it's really easy to put one of these in. With the right kind of distribution system. So, but there are models coming out from the top manufacturers next year that can do high temperature. So I'm also in line to get one of those or try one of those for my house next year. From some of these top manufacturers, they can put out 160, 170 degree water. But again, I still would be in the position of, I still have to put in these horrible window units in the summer, which is my least favorite household chore period. And these units, I think are really the answer to that, because you could leave them in all year. And but we're all waiting eagerly on these pilots that New York City Housing Authority and the State Energy Authority are running in New York City. And there's many manufacturers that are entering this space. So I think this is super exciting. Okay, so that's new technology, which I think is super exciting. So again, we were talking about what would be a good candidate for this. One thing, in terms of cost and saving money, the best, if you're heating have an oil furnace, it's a no-brainer, especially if it's old, to replace it with a heat pump, because oil is the most expensive. It's also the dirtiest fuel from a lot of perspectives, cleaning up your tank, all the grime it puts into your heating system, etc. And it's also the most expensive in terms of dollars per amount of heat you get out by far. And propane is not that much better, but I don't think there's much propane around here. Gas is kind of a wash. So this is a local install where we actually looked at their fuel bills before and after. This is Peter's house. I think you guys all know Peter. He got some Bosch heat pump, and here's the winter months, how much gas was used. And they put this in the fall of 2023. Yeah. Anyway, we looked at his bills and the costs, and he's going to be saving about $200 a year. It's pretty much a wash for which is good. But one of the things we face here, probably in a lot of communities, is gas is just so darn cheap, natural gas, as a fuel source. And even though the heat pumps are more efficient with electricity, like, up to 3 times more efficient than gas, the price per unit of energy is that much cheaper for gas. Does that make sense? It's just it's such a cheap energy source. So I will say though, with any of these things that we were talking about on like the second slide, do you remember I had all the things you could think about doing? The thing to think about is, how old is your hot water heater? Is it pretty old? You should start thinking about converting that to a heat pump now. Start pricing stuff. Instead of when it fails in the middle of the night and you have a flood in your basement, you're going to just probably get the cheapest piece of crap gas out there, and then you're going to be stuck with it for 15 years. Same with a car. The obvious time to do it is when you want to get rid of your car or replace it. So the time to think about all this stuff. How old is your furnace? How old is your outdoor unit? If you just got it and you wouldn't replace it ordinarily, maybe you'd look at something else. But how old your stuff is really an important part of this. And that's a good way to think about that. Like if your gas mower is acting oddly or something, you should really go and think about getting a battery powered mower, etc. So here's some references. This is a really good article in the New York Times Wirecutter about, if you're thinking about doing a heat pump, a lot of things to keep into consideration. And one of the nice things they have here is links to the top manufacturers like Mitsubishi, LG, Daikin for heat pumps. And you can put in your zip code and get contractors near you who have been certified and trained in heat pump installations, which is really good, because you want to get a good manufacturer. You want to make sure that it's really a cold climate heat pump. So if you are thinking about it, I would always insist that it has to be on that NEEP list, so it really will work at low temperature and be the most efficient unit possible, and you get your federal tax credit. And that's here. This list here, if you click on it, you can say you got a quote for a particular heat pump. It better be on this. A lot of contractors down here don't know about this, but in New York State, we only incentivize heat pumps that are listed in this database. Okay, and this is a great a guide that has tax information, everything for electrifying your house, a lot on the IRA, and then Pico does really cheap. I forget how much it costs to come out your house and do a energy audit, including a blower door pressure test of your house, which is the first thing you should always do, is make sure that your house is keeping the heat in as well as possible. And so that's strongly recommended. And finally, this is the website Melissa mentioned, we talked about. And this is just a great resource if you're thinking about like solar. I think, right, Melissa, you could get people contacted.
Yeah,
with
Steve, you have
Solarize.
the email listed, not the website. The website is
Yeah.
climateaction.org.
Oh, I should put that up. Yeah.
Yeah, you should put that there. I'll put it in the chat. And I also want to
Thank you.
mention the Pico Energy Assessment. It's $49, but Solarize Delco, we have a $10 off code. And I'll put that in the chat too.
Awesome. And so one of the things, if you reach out to us, we get about one a month or so, people that are interested. So Sam and I will have a conversation with you, often go to your house. And we have actually done this for about 10 families in the area. And one of the things we've done is compile people's experience that have gone through it. And so what we do, we don't want to recommend, oh, you have to use this contractor, blah, blah, blah. But we give the people's experience, like, oh, I use Unique. Unique is very popular around here. And they did a great job on my ground source heat pump or whatever. So we just have all the people's experience and what brand of heat pump they use and their experience and what they would like you to know. And we take their name off of it. So, and you can take or leave that. It may help you reaching out to people. So we're constantly updating this as more people do that. So that's another thing that can help. But yeah, Sam and I will come out and look at your quotes and you know, and I think help you find a heat pump that's the right size, that's going to be the most cost effective, and also not use this dual fuel where, you know, someone's going to say, oh, you still have to have gas, and provide some pushback on that, you know, based on all of our experience. So, you know, please take advantage of that if you are interested in this. And that's about all I have.
Thank you, Steve. Very informative.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
And I think your tip about not waiting till the last second, because you said if you have no heat, you're going to take anything or no hot water right away. Yeah.
Exactly, for sure. Like just about an hour ago, I was down in the basement and I see the my hot water heater, which is probably 20-ish years old, is starting to leak.
Oops.
So luckily I'm catching the drips, but I'm like, okay, I think I have to follow my own advice now.
Yeah.
That may be a clue. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of contractors are very hostile to heat pumps and don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I've had some experience with that. They really push the gas ones. They push a
Yeah.
hybrid one. But I also, what are your thoughts? I always thought a tankless a tankless water heater would be better, but they don't make a tankless heat pump one, right?
Right. They do make tankless electric ones, so you know it runs off electricity, but it needs an enormous amount of current to heat water that fast. It's essentially like you know those little things when if you wanted to heat like a cup of tea, you could plug in and just put in one of those little coils in. That's essentially what it is. So if you think about how much current that would need to heat the hot water, it's a lot. And the reality is, especially with heat pumps, there's no vent. It's entirely encased in insulation, the water. It's not losing any heat. So there's not really any need for that. With gas, there is some advantage because you're heating it and it's always losing heat through the draft over where the hot air from the flame went. So it's constantly losing air heat through your chimney. So a tankless, if you only had gas, would probably be more efficient than a tankless for gas. But yeah, I don't really think it would make much sense for an electric one. But there's no need to do it. Again, you can go to Home Depot and actually, I think IRA gives you $2,000 tax break for water heaters. So if you do that 1 year and it's installed, maybe it comes out to $3,000 or $2,500 from your contractor. You know, you could get one pretty cheap. One of those a heat pump water heater. And they work best if they're in like a garage or some area, not inside your house, because what happens is if it's in your house or in your, suppose your basement is heated, right? It'll suck the heat out of the air in your basement and put it into your water. So then you have to heat that air again in your basement. And so you're really losing a lot of the efficiencies, and it's more expensive. And also they make noise like any air conditioner would. And so if you have like if you have like if you have a water heater in an unconditioned basement or in a garage or something, that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. And Sam actually put in a split water heater, so it's just like those air source heat pumps that we talked about before, and it has essentially a tank in the inside, and it's got the heat pump on the outside, so it's always pumping heat into that tank to keep that water nice and hot. And obviously that works the best in the summer, when the air is warmer, and in the winter it is less efficient. But they're really efficient, those ones. So that's probably what I'm going to be looking at. So I'm going to be calling Sam on that. So yeah, any other questions or anything else people would like to cover?
Nope, not right now.
All right. So Melissa, I think people who registered will get a recording, right? I think that's the way it
Yep.
works.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, good.
We'll send out the recording as soon as we can. Thank you all for joining tonight.
All right,
Thank you
thanks
so
a lot.
much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.